everyone, and welcome to the final day of Saudi Workspace Summit. My name is Marina Mirzian. I'm founder of Intellier and your chairperson for today. So over the past 2 days, we explored how brand identity, cultural values, sustainability are also shaping the future of workspaces. Today, we will turn our focus to designing for inclusion and well-being, ensuring that our work environments cater to diverse needs and foster a sense of belonging. So I will just give you a bit of an overview of what's going to be happening today. We'll begin today with a session focused on sustainable workspaces and well-being, followed by discussion on how lighting and well-being intersect, a topic that highlights the profound impact design choices have on our health and productivity as well. We'll then hear from Ahmed Al-Sharabasi during the keynote Promise versus Potential, Vision 2030's impact on future workspaces, where he'll discuss how Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 is driving the evolution of both flexible as well as co-working spaces. Finally, Abdulaziz Al-Zem will close with a fascinating keynote titled Looking to the Past for the Future, Evolving Lighting Design in Saudi Arabia, which will explore how traditional elements can inspire, innovate, future-forward design. So today is all about creating workspaces that not only reflect where we are, but where we are headed, spaces that inspire, adapt, and connect. So with that in mind, let me introduce you to our first panel for today, and we have 5 amazing speakers today with us. So our panel for today is titled Designing Identity, Designing for All, Creating Inclusive and Culturally Harmonious Workspaces. Let me give you a little bit of overview. So research consistently shows that companies with diverse environments are 35% more likely to outperform their peers, according to McKinsey. And inclusive workspaces can increase employee engagement by 30%, according to Deloitte. Obviously, we're talking a lot about Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, which also emphasizes economic diversification as well as international collaboration. So, which means we're going to be seeing more and more workspaces that embrace generational but also cultural diversity. With having that in mind, today's panel will explore the importance of designing workspaces that cater to the needs of multi-generational but also culturally diverse workforce. So, having said that, let me introduce you to our panelists for today. So, I would like to invite to the stage Abdul Aziz Al-Kara, Director, Project Manager for KCA JLL. Hello, welcome on board. Fatima Al-Madani, Chief Executive Officer of Mamor Interior. Fatima, welcome on board. Chromatiki Zamani, Founder and Design Director at Kiklos Architects. Chromatiki, great to have you with us. Dawai Al-Morawi, Chief Executive Officer at Grid Design Office. And Tony Nakwi, Founder and Design Principal at Rain & Co. Perfect. Thank you all for joining us today. And before we dive into our topic as well, I always ask all of the panelists, it's day 3 of the Workspace Summit. This is the first summit that we're organizing right here in Riyadh. So from your own perspective, why do you think it's important that we have these discussions, especially when it comes to the workspace design? And what do you think about the summit in general as a platform to have this dialogue as well?
Hello, yeah, thank you. No, that's definitely, as we witness these days, let's say an outstanding era, specifically in the kingdom in terms of the evolution of the workplace. The industry demands everyone to be up to date with the most advanced technologies, up to date with the nature of the changes being the organizations being exposed to. And if we don't catch up with those changes on a regular basis, then that means definitely that we're going to be in the back seat, which doesn't fit the current pace where the kingdom is moving with
the offices. Thank you so much.
Well, as Abdulaziz says, especially after COVID, the people now, they're more aware of the workspace environment. It's not just a workspace, it's an environment where we stay like third of our day. I'm really happy to join this panel. I chose it specifically because we had a lot of case studies or project that we worked on redesigning the place because there was misunderstanding of the culture of the people inside the office. So yeah.
Thank you, Fatima. I'm looking forward because real case studies
Oh,
and project
I have a
examples.
case to share.
Amazing. Very perfect. Romantic from your
Good
side.
afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. I think that the most important reason to talk about workspace is the amount of time we spend there, all of us. Like most of our time we spend during the day is with our colleagues rather than our families. So it does make sense to emphasize its importance and to find ways to make it more pleasant, more inclusive, like a place that you enjoy being, but you don't stay there all day long.
Perfect. Do you want to have from your side?
Yeah, hi. So I think this is a really important matter because 10 years ago we were starting to educate our clients about the importance of the workspace. It was only for, like the big corporations, the corporate offices, especially now in Saudi, where you have a lot of people in the young age and a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of new offices. So I think that's where we started actually seeing that, let's say, understanding of how important the workspace should be. And I think it changed. Now every office, small or big, has its own character, and people want to build that character. This is what's nice, that even corporate offices that we used to see like early on in Saudi, they are trying to adapt to this new blood or new ideas from the new generation, new entrepreneurs. And now like a lot of the corporate offices that we're redoing, they want to have these shared spaces. They want to have a bit of that feeling of, like the young generation and all of that.
Okay. And it would be great to hear later what type of exactly conversations you have with your clients when it comes to those offices.
Yes, I think, and it's, I think these summits or all of that, it's kind of educating everybody about these, the importance of the workspace.
For sure. Tony, from your side.
I don't know that I have anything to add after all of that. I think now more than ever, this subject has become really important because the social dynamic is changing, the work landscape is changing. A lot of things happening at this point in history, not just in the country, but technologically as well, that's having an impact on people's behaviors and the way that they're working in the workplace. The recovery from COVID and those relationships, that developed through them, and the institution of remote working, and how that's almost reversing itself now. So people getting used to going back to working in the office and shared spaces where there was that apprehension during that COVID period. So those dynamics again are changing. And then, as Joai says, as the younger generation start to forge their way forward, lots of new entrepreneurs that are appearing, changes in the way that the business landscape is in Saudi Arabia, with a lot more opportunities for what would traditionally be regarded as reserved for big corporations. Now there's a lot more opportunities for Saudis to develop business opportunities as well. And they grow very rapidly. And I think the thing about Saudi culture that's probably different from other places is the way that they grasp change tends to be quite rapid. So ideas can be seeded quite quickly and grow quite rapidly. So it's this idea of adapting and changing is not something novel here. It's actually something that they've been able to do for a long time. And so as the landscape changes, things like culturally appropriate spaces become more important as they start to bring in ideas and people from outside again.
Yes, thank you so much. And I like that you also mentioned, there's so much disruption happening in workspace globally. You mentioned COVID. You also mentioned when we look at locally in the region, specifically in Saudi, you talk about your government entities, you talk about big corporates, global companies, but we also talk about Saudi's SMEs, right? Entrepreneurs, homegrown companies, startups. They all have different work dynamics and different cultures they want to try to bring in. Globally, when we look, this is the first time when we actually have 5 generations in workspace, from traditionalists that are also known as a silent generation to Gen Zs, that which we in the previous panels we talked, they're so vocal. They're vocal about what they want from their employers, what they want from their workspace. So we have these so many different generations, baby boomers, millennials, Gen Zs. So having looked at all of those generations, there's a lot on your plate as a designer to dissect, understand, and come up with solutions that are going to work for everyone. So having said that, how do you tackle those challenges today in Saudi, in Riyadh, with your clients?
No, thank you for the question, and I'm sure my colleague designers here can talk about this from a technical perspective much better than me, but I'll address this topic from maybe a different angle. So as you say, 2020 was kind of a milestone year in the world in general and in the industry specifically. That being said, we thought that there will be definitely a reduction in having people actually working from the workspace, which proved to be right for almost a couple of years until 2020. Then again, the behavior of workspaces has changed. As per recent research Jalal have done, actually more than 60% of organizations believe that there's huge investments being put in developing workspaces until 2030, which means that definitely there is a need and a demand to come up with more innovative solutions to adopt for these changes. Now, when we address those challenges from an inclusion perspective, let's address first what defines inclusion in organizations, right? So basically, it's what helping everyone from different cultures, background, experiences to deliver the same common goal for an organization in the most efficient and seamless way. So to achieve that, there are multiple factors should be addressed from an organizational perspective, from a workspace perspective, and from any other, let's say, technical perspective. From workspace perspective, it's very important to be thoughtful of where the industry sits today. That means we need to be thoughtful of for example, the AI adoption for the industry in general and workspace specifically. We need to be aware also of the challenges the market's facing in retaining talent and how a smart designed workspace can help in achieving those goals. Inclusion and diversity is a two-way path, right? So an inclusive organization basically will definitely help developing a smart workspace, and vice versa. Smart workspace will help the organization in delivering their inclusivity targets. So in my opinion, this topic is very important to be addressed from the expert in the industry. However, it also has to be thought of as a value-added topic rather than cost center. So at the moment, majority of organizations look at workspaces as cost centers and purely a facility without giving it, the enough attention that it's definitely one important resource of developing the organization goals.
And just building on what you said, obviously when you mentioned about inclusion and all the new challenges that are imposing with new technologies like AI, and going back to multi-generations, they adopt these technologies at different pace and different speed. You have people who don't like those changes as well, so that's always an interesting dynamics. But do you have these discussions as well with HRs, not just the clients, when it comes to how you tackle the multi-generational?
Well, actually, we always ask as designers, we always ask HRs. We sit with HRs, we sit with of course, the owner. We mainly focus to get the needs of every employee in the company, as we said, now we have different generations and different majors than before. Like before we have like certain jobs, but now we have like new jobs has been invented since we have the technology and whatever is happening. Of course, there is a gap between millennials and the old people and Gen Z. So having all these in one space, it's kind of a dilemma at first, but this is how we want to reach in the middle to get their needs, achieve their needs. I can bring like a small example. For example, lunchtime. Let's go like a zoom in a specific example. As a lunchtime, we had this client who has like a big canteen for everyone, and a canteen that contains like almost 40 people inside of, so that's a big area. And then he realized nobody eats at the same time, and he didn't know that. Like before, the old mindset, they have this mindset that from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. this is my lunchtime, this is my lunch break, it's in their mindset. But when it comes to the new generations, maybe they follow some diet or something, maybe intermediate fasting, maybe there's a trend they're following. They don't have a specific time, or they have to sit on a canteen. This is where he came like, this is a wasted area. It's almost like 50 square meter wasted area. And this is like a double work when you try now to utilize this area again and change the whole furniture. So that's just like a tiny example between the new generation and old generation. It has to be considered before.
Okay, thank you. Grammatiki, from your side.
I'm going to build on that. Definitely after COVID, we entered the residential era of offices. So offices stopped being that, how can I say, formal space. We felt how it is to be working from the comfort of our place. So we saw that we tried to bring that in that sense at the workspace itself. So what I've been observing is that more and more workspaces are trying to bring the comfort for the users. It's the first time in decades that we have such human-centered designs when it comes to workspace. What is interesting, this term in the university, we are discussing with our third-year interior designers about the future of workspace. So we asked them to make a research and then conceptualize how they envisage the future workspace to be. What they came up with was the value of informality. Not having to sit in a specific space to work, the belongingness of the space is something that they don't really care about, the Gen Zs. What they emphasize on is the flexibility without actually realizing what a flexible space is. Like they're not setting the parameters, but they all talk about flexibility of space. So what the new generation wants is a place where they have the option to choose, even though if you observe them in the class, they always sit at the same spaces. So they want to have the option, even if their decision is the same every single day. So the aspect of informality of work is very strong in their brains. And I think that that's going to be the main line of design, how to make formal workspaces become more informal and accommodate them. And at the same time, like, I think that they will drag us all from that comfort zone of a specific office. And the need, what is interesting also is the need that those young people have to also isolate themselves. So at the same time, they're talking at the same time for informal, flexible spaces, but they all highlight the need of having a space, yes, where they can go, they can hide for a while, and they can put their thoughts together and go out again. So I think that the two elements that we will see a lot talking about inclusivity is that informality that we potentially as designers need to translate into the built space.
Thank you. Jamar, from your side, what are you
I
seeing?
totally agree with what she said. I think this is coming from even from our experience with like post-COVID time. We found out that actually people want to be in a place where everybody's working. So they used to go, like home offices were not the answer, but it's like a hybrid between being in the comfort of your home and in the same time being actually around people who have that vibe, and everybody's working and you feel that, like vibe of like having people around you. So we found out that a lot of the new generation would go to cafes where, let's say, the old generation would not concentrate in a cafe at all and work there. So I think from there came a lot of these projects where we saw shared workspaces and all of that. But in the projects that we have that you can have in one office, a lot of the generations, we tackle this by having, trying to introduce, like self-expression for everybody. And I think self-expression does not have an age. So if you, like just try to push everybody to have some self-expression in the office and just like gather everybody and ask them how they want to work, you will end up with a space that has a lot of diversity. Like some of these offices, we had standing tables for work, and I think some of the people in that office, we did that, they wanted to work standing, not sitting. So we're trying to provide like different environments that suit everybody, and slowly we found out that even the older generation, they're adapting to this self-expression and they're requesting like certain things, and I think when you have that kind of, like everybody is in the vibe of self-expressing and doing what they like, I think it's kind of makes everybody wants to participate and then find their own space in the office. So I really agree that, these spaces now are more flexible. You have different type of workrooms. You have like a small closed areas, open areas. Not everything is the same. And everybody in that office would find what they'll find their voice inside the office.
Thank you. Tony, I can see you're nodding, agreeing, disagreeing. Anything to add?
Not necessarily disagree. I think that at Rain we have a slightly different approach than perhaps a lot of our colleagues. So we focus a lot on branded spaces. So and I think our approach differs in the sense that our focus is on creating spaces that represent organizations that have a strong sense of purpose, that have a strong sense of who they are and what they set out to do. So where we differ is that we are not crafting spaces where they have to conform to the workforce, to people that are going there. Rather, we're creating spaces that represent a brand that people will naturally share the same values, will naturally gravitate towards and become part of that space. So I think that's kind of where we differ. And I think I think if you look a lot of the big successful organizations in the world, they do have the Apples, the Googles, whoever they might be, they do have a strong sense of purpose. They do have a strong sense of identity. Part of that identity may be creating inclusive and diverse spaces, but in other cases it may not be. So for instance, we did some of the Saudi projects that we've done. They are focused more on creating branded spaces that represent them as an organization. And if you're going to work there, you're going to be part of an organization where they expect conformity from you rather than the other way around, where an organization is expected to conform to what could potentially be a multitude of different attitudes, different perspectives, different ideas. It'd be quite challenging to create spaces that do that. The other thing is there may be some really good reasons why you don't create, individualized, inclusive spaces. So for instance, we did an interior branded design for an Olympic swim academy in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. And the challenges there were not about inclusive spaces because there are so many regulatory requirements that they have to adhere to, that though creating a very open, inclusive space where you could do lots of different things and have lots of different ideas that allow people to excel in different ways would mean that they could potentially lose their license because they would be infringing on certain regulations that they have to conform with. So I think you have to be very careful about how you approach. And I think in particular inclusivity nowadays, understanding what that means, particularly in a country like Saudi Arabia, whereas perhaps in Europe or America, we have a very different idea of what we mean by inclusivity and diversity. I don't necessarily think that model works in Saudi Arabia. Again, it's a country that has a very strong sense of its own self-identity, its own personality. And I think it's, for the most part, again, we've found historically that Saudi Arabia has always been a very inclusive place. It's because historically it's relied quite heavily on people coming from the outside to work in Saudi Arabia, that for the most part spaces in Saudi Arabia have always been very inclusive. I think the difference now at this point in history is the mixture of generations is where the challenges are, because attitudes are very different. You have very traditional attitudes versus more liberal and open attitudes. And creating spaces there where people can kind of thrive is something of a challenge. And the way that we've approached that in the past is trying to facilitate learning environments where people can learn from each other. So traditionally, people, particularly older generations mixing with younger generations, what you're trying to do is have this crossover of skills and experience. So the older generation have much more experience and much more knowledge, which is actually very beneficial and very helpful to a younger generation who don't have that skills and experience. But what they bring to the table is perhaps a new approach to doing things that maybe have been done in a different way traditionally. So I think, there's not a one-size-fits-all for all of these things.
Just sorry to interrupt. Building on what you said about you use Apple and you use Google as an example. And in one of the previous discussions, we also had
Google and Apple as an example.
We had a bit of a discussion on that. That obviously the design of those offices is centered around their culture and their mission and their purpose. But a lot of time we see clients asking, oh, I want Google type of office. Give me slides, give me football, give me that. So how do you tackle those issues? I'm just going to go back to designers and then we'll continue. When you have clients who do come with those kind of requirements, but it's not necessarily part of their culture, right?
Yeah, they always do. They have like this mindset like, oh, if I want to be successful and have a great work environment, I want to be like Google or Apple. And here when we try to educate the clients somehow, and we sit for like maybe the first meeting can take like 2 to 3 hours, but yeah, it's worth it. This is where we sit and talk about the culture of your office. Away from just the diversity in our culture, not in different city. In the same city we have different culture between north and south. And you guys know, the people who lives in the north, it's different than who live in the south. They have different culture somehow, different district, different culture. Can you imagine that? So when it comes also to work environment, there is a different culture, depends on the company values. So here when we speak about the people and the different culture, and we speak about the company values, what's your values, what's your culture that you want to apply to your office, and this is how it's going to work. And then once we finish the session, you realize that they need closed spaces, they need some segregation, depends on their culture. So then Google doesn't work. The open space doesn't work for you. Maybe for other clients, yes. Maybe for a youthful company with hype and Gen Z, for example, yeah, that works. But so yeah, this is the educational part. It's what we do. It's part of the designer job, and to educate the clients. And one thing that we really like about the new generation, when it comes to that, they are aware of their needs at least. Yeah,
and they're more
they
vocal
know
about
what they
that.
need. As
So
she said, they want
to
flexible places. They want
Yeah.
But yeah, the misconception when we say, yeah, I want like this office or that office, this is where come designer job to educate.
Okay, so I can see you.
Yeah, I think it all goes back, as you said, to the client's brief and the client's, like what is the nature of the company. But we always try also as designers to do our part in trying to convince them to have that nature, but to have some self-expression inside the spaces, even if the self-expression is a closed office for somebody. But I think that kind of, like having these employees, they have their ownership of their space. I think that's something that we always market to the clients. Yeah, but of course it has to follow their values and their head count and whatever they have as hierarchy or different places. But I think it's proven that if you have a better environment designed for the people who are working in the space, you're creating a relationship between the employee and their space, and that's kind of very humane, and it makes them at the end of the day like the place that they're working at. We see some of the, like the companies, they have a small gym. Some of the companies have a small nursery area. So I think it just, as a designer, we're trying to answer their needs, but in the best way possible that will create that kind of bond between the company and the employees.
And you're never going to make everyone 100% happy in your office space, right? There's always going to be someone.
Can I just add one thing? Sorry.
Yes.
I think sometimes, particularly when we get Saudi clients asking for these kind of spaces, it's often because they're trying to fulfill a need that they have as an organization, and they just see that as one avenue to achieving it. And I think as designers, it's important that we just need to ask the right questions. So it's like, okay, what are you trying to achieve by having a ping pong table and beanbags in the office? I mean, what does that do for you? I mean, does it make people feel comfortable and whatever? Yeah, but ultimately, beyond that, what are you trying to achieve? And for the most part, organizations are looking for their people to be productive. They want a comfortable space where people are just going to be able to do their job, meet their KPIs and make sure that the organization thrives. But I think the other thing apart from that is that, again, as designers, we don't always get the really nice jobs. Sometimes there are really difficult jobs. So, if you're doing an interior design for like a nice trendy boutique company that's very popular, very trendy, that's fine. But that's going to be a very different challenge if you're having to create a space for a call center for people that have to sell car insurance. I mean, your job there is to really minimize stress, because that's a very high stress situation. You have performance targets for the staff, there's all sorts of things that are going on. They might have to deal with horrible customers. How do you create an environment where those people can have a more productive but also a more enjoyable space? And sometimes our job is not to do that. It's just to manage the levels of stress that those people have through the design that we do, through the spaces that we create.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. And before we continue to talk about, what's happening in Saudi now when it comes to cultural diversity, when it comes to maybe a larger influx of expats as well, just to understand those nuances and what's happening. Just going back to JLL, obviously you are that kind of first point of contact when it comes to big corporates who are coming to the region as well. What do you see from that kind of real estate? We're talking about utilization of the space. You said, a cafeteria, 50 square meters that's not utilized throughout the day. What are their requirements when it comes? Because we know that every square foot is, it's a valuable asset. So what are the requirements that are coming to you specifically?
No, that's a great question. So as you said, we are in the forefront with development in any workspace for multinational, international organizations, and including local organizations. But multinational organizations comes a good example of what we hear. What's the first thing we hear, right? The behavior has changed, or the pattern has changed for the last 10 years. Like, for example, if we're talking about an organization coming to Saudi 10 years ago, they will come with a lot of stress and tension and, ambiguity and how we can segregate, how we can separate, how we can, it's like fully giving us the authority to design whatever fits the culture, which was very restrictive in a way, right? So if you notice 10 years old offices today, if you go there, it's copy paste the same type of offices despite the design or the DNA of the organization, let's say. Nowadays, no, there is at least 80% of the organization DNA being adopted as is in the Saudi workspace or office. And there is definitely a serious respect for the culture, and that comes from multiple aspects. We're talking about the first thing is the adoption of the very strong 2030 vision. A lot of international clients comes with an alignment to the vision. Actually, their presence in the kingdom is to be a significant part of 2030 vision. So that tells us a lot about how organizations are ready to be flexible and adapt to fit in the market, unlike enforcing specific standards, let's say. That's one aspect of the adoption of the local culture. Add to that, there's also a lot of emphasis from international organizations about how we can attract local talent, right? So with the type or the nature of their current organizational understanding, there might be a gap between how the organization operates outside and how they need to change or tweak some of the standards to attract local talents. Noting that local talents are usually from the youth generation, so this is a very a niche area we're addressing here. And at the same time, they're very ambitious about how to be exposed to the international work environment. So those are the challenges which I think are basically the solutions an international organization is coming with and asking for whenever they come to the market. Now, Tony mentioned a very great point about difference between an organization coming with a very clear purpose and an organization which comes with, what can work. And that's the first question, which tells you that it might be a nice office, but it will never be a functional office, right? And it will never deliver the required value. And this office might need to be renovated in a few years once a new CEO comes in, right? So that's what I think organizations really to pay a lot of attention to and put as much energy and effort in employing the required expertise to understand the organization vision, what the organization would like to deliver exactly in the next 5-10 years, and have someone champion this mandate till the end. And because I'm sure that everyone here agrees on whenever you are on board, there's a lot of bits and pieces, you try to pick up from the chain just to make sure that you deliver a full image of the scoop. However, what happens is there's someone do the vision and the mission and the values of the organization with a very solid, decent organization structure, and then someone else come and say, hey, I need to have an office which looks like, have a specific color pattern or have a specific design feature, or to be in a high-rise building or whatever. And then there is this gap between whoever designed the organization or structured the organization and the one who's championing the office development. And then also you've got the HR and the tech team being left out and come at the end of the project. Oh, you guys missed out. We wanted 1, 2, and 3. So at the moment we witness a lot of demand and requirements for someone really aware of all the aspects of the process to be able to deliver a lean and a complete picture of workspace.
We talked a lot in some of previous panels about the role of project managers in this case, particular to dissect, understand the client visions and designers as well. Just building on what you said as well, and Tony, what you said about, car insurance office, it has to be functional. Do you feel that somehow the focus on productivity gets lost when we are having these discussions of making everyone happy and, focusing a bit more on this Instagrammable kind of almost moment of offices?
Well, I think if you look on it, I mean, if you'd asked people honestly, what's the point of creating an inclusive, diverse workspace where everyone's really happy and, everyone gets on and it's all sunshine and roses? Ultimately, it's productivity. Organizations want people that are happy so that they do their jobs really well. I mean, in the old days, it was a very simple contract. I give you money, you come to work for me. And that was about it. I think life is a lot more complicated now. I think what a lot of companies, the stumbling block at the moment, the challenges that organizations are facing today is trying to decide to what extent are they responsible for your well-being, whether it's your mental state, whether it's, some specific habit or behavior that you have. To what point does that part of your personal life become the responsibility of the organization that you're working for? And I think in Saudi Arabia we have to be particularly careful when we talk about these ideas of diversity and inclusion, because like I said, those have very specific ideological connotations when you're talking about it in Europe or America. That doesn't apply here. It's a very different place. And so I think, again, when you're speaking with international organizations, they're coming to work here, it's like there's a lot of baggage that you have to leave at the door, because otherwise
it's not going to work. Okay, thank you. And just when you mentioned an emphasis on that well-being and correlation with productivity, just grammatically going back to you, I know you recently went through that process personally with your own office when it comes to B Corp certification. I always like to bring that to these kind of panel discussions, because I think it's important to kind of have that self-discovery where in a way ultimately you're advising your clients as well to follow the same path, right?
Design space needs to reflect, I will agree with Tony, the ethos of the organization, okay? So any purpose-driven business should have a very clear picture of what their ethos is and how they would like that to become space. Is a very long discussion and a very long talk about being comfortable at work and how we can cover the needs of all generations. But the truth is, like my truth is that workspace has to balance our lives. It seems to me that the last years we have lost a bit of the balance of the workspace and the life. So we design the spaces for people to be able to spend time there, to be happy there, but we also need to let them know that as designers that only half of their life is their work. At some stage they need to finish the work and then go on with the next step. So it doesn't make sense to create a working environment where there are sleeping pods, there are cafes and restaurants and an exercise, yes, and a room to exercise, and then you leave your workspace to sleep. Like this, to me at least, to the ethos of my business, it doesn't make sense. We want people to come and spend pleasant time at work, productive of course, because the first pillar for a business to be sustainable is to be financially viable. So if there is no productivity, there is no such thing. So designers, and I include myself in that, we tend to over-design the space to accommodate as much of somebody's needs as possible. But at the end of the day, we need to find the line of the workspace and the living space. So yeah, I totally agree. We need to go to work and then continue with the rest of the things. But that goes back to the ethos of the organization, right? So if a company wants its people to stay there as much as they're willing to invest, like beyond their scope, yes, it makes sense to create of those facilities. But that's something for all of us to think about. Does it really make sense? Who doesn't want to finish his work an hour early without a break potentially, and then go straight to see their kids? I have a 5-year-old little guy at home waiting for me, so I'm the owner of the business, okay? So my leading by example is to get a shorter lunch break and then leave half an hour early to see my son. And I'm happy when I see the other mothers who work with us do the same thing. Or I'm happy to hear that, you know what, I'm gonna stay an hour longer in the morning at home, and then because my child needed me in the morning, and then I'm gonna leave on time, I'm not gonna make a break. So when we talk about inclusion and about diversity, maybe we need to educate our clients, not just about the design space that is our expertise, but also educate them about the importance of creating an ethos for the people working there, that the productivity will not come from the pleasant environment, but from the sense of pride of the employees themselves to be willing to belong to that organization. So is a two-way road, I think.
I just wanted to add, and then maybe I can get a point for both of you on this topic, especially when we look at that cultural inclusivity and when we look at that influx of expats coming to Saudi as well. If I look at percentage-wise population that comes from Europe or US, it's still within less than 1% of expat community in Saudi. But if I look at expat community in Saudi, we see majority are coming from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, so South Asian countries where necessarily don't have the same living environments, right? So we saw that during COVID, especially in countries such as UAE. Many people who are living in shared spaces, they wanted to come back to the office and enjoy those amenities that they have at work and they don't have necessarily in their living environments as well. So just kind of building on what Grammatic said about, having that work-life balance, do you have these requirements as well when we talk about the different cultures coming to the workspace?
Well, that's what we were implying, that if your company needs, let's say, sleeping pods, maybe they're like a marketing or a videographer that stays late. So I think it just, what we have to research and really touch base with the client is their actual need. So let's say in this company that they were for insurance and all of that, they were always talking to their employees about health and all of that. So they added this little room that has a treadmill and something. Maybe we will not add it in all the other offices, but I think it's nice to have a space designed well for your own company that serves your your goal at the end, even if it looks like something that is more welcoming. Like my sister used to work in the college. All these people in college where they're teaching, they love the nursery, and I think that's one of the benefits of the job. So you get people applying for this specific academic job just because these spaces have nurseries. So I think for them this is a necessity, but maybe in another office it won't be. So I think it's very important that we answer what needs to be there in your office, not in Google, not in any other place, that might serve your need, even if it sounds trivia for other offices. Like we have one project that they used to sell these products. They have product stands, and they wanted like supermarket experience. So they have this for their clients, for their employees, but also it's kind of their training. So we wouldn't have a mini supermarket in all of the offices, but I think it serves, at the end of the day, these owners are thinking of the return on their investment if they invested in such space. So I think that's where I agree that we have to really understand the fine line between doing something because it's trend or doing something because they really need it, and it's at the end, it will go back to the business and make it a better investment. And I think when we have to sell something like that for the client, like a mini gym or a small nursery, we would sell it under that kind of calculation and study, that this will serve eventually your business, not the other way around.
Thank you so much. I'll just ask Fatima to add on that.
I
then we'll
believe
open it.
I kind of agree and disagree with Grammatica, if you allow me. I'm going to argue a little bit. Well, I believe we should hold the stick from the middle. I agree with what Jawahar said. It depends on the company needs, like the supermarket idea, because they have this selling experience. And I noticed that the employees, they feel more related to the workspace when you have these facilities serving them. They feel loyal, they enjoy the working environment. If there's like a lot of work and submission, especially in our field, they feel like home a little bit. I know they're gonna spend just like 8 hours, but these 8 hours should be like healthy mentally for them. Physically and everything, a good lighting, a great space, a great break area. I had this client where it's beautiful in photos, the design, it was beautiful. It's like Apple-inspired office, all white, all clean and minimal. But nobody stayed there. They rather work at home remotely. And that was a very huge problem for the owner. Why? Because it's minimal, it has this cells, closed cells, beautiful in pictures, but it's not functional for the employees. I believe also, I always hear that from my colleagues that they rather work in an environment that has a nursery, has a nice design, has a great break area, and they might apply to another company because it has these services. So you want to attract the employees to love their space, have their needs achieved there. So yeah, that's why I believe we should just hold the stick from the middle. I know it's a workspace, you want to
And just to add on that, as you said, a great coffee, right? Coffee just became such an important part of everyone's
actually,
coffee
yes,
culture. Yes.
Coffee is like number one thing. I should add it before
Before anything
do you
else.
have a coffee bar?
So it goes really back to what Tony said. The designer needs to ask the right questions to the client to see what is actually needed in that specific workspace.
Perfect.
I think the other thing that I would add is that I think as designers we can sometimes get caught up in the excitement of doing a project and trying to solve all of these problems. But I think there are times where you have to sort of face the reality of designer and knowing where to draw the line, that we can't design our way out of problems that are organizational problems. So for instance, if you're working on an interior design for some trendy marketing agency and you find that you have to do things that help facilitate a lifestyle where people have to stay late very often, you're trying to design your way to a solution that's actually an organizational problem. The fact that people have to stay late in order to finish their job means there's something fundamentally wrong with the way that organization runs. So we shouldn't get caught up in this way of trying to design an organization's way out of its own problems.
Good. Thank you so much. I will just mindful of time, and I think we're just now starting to have a conversation. I just want to see if we have any questions from the audience. I think we can take one question here. Yes, go ahead. Okay, the mic is coming, and then we will just need to borrow one mic, and then we'll share depending on who are you. And if I could just ask you to address question to a specific person, just so because I'm mindful of time. Yes.
All right. It's not a question. It's just sharing thoughts.
Okay.
Let's say. One of the critical point is, as designer, we try to be creative to help the company to achieve their goals. But what's important is to make sure that the HR can control what's happening in that space. So the employment conduct of work, the code, is like, they can control the stuff when they are standing in the corner and they're speaking for 1 hour and they are leaving their works. This is what's more crucial for brands. When you introduce big open spaces, people will start to lose. So it's designer HR enforcing that law to make space works and make the companies generate and achieve their goals.
I think one of the things that we're experiencing right now, which is the challenge, is that because there's such an entrepreneurial environment in Saudi Arabia right now, is that a lot of the work that we're seeing is coming from startups, for instance, where they don't have established departments like HR, like finance. Everything's kind of rapid turnaround, off the cuff. You're thinking on your feet. They want a space that's conducive to that kind of environment where you want people to be comfortable, you want people to feel part of something because it's a startup, you need to get something off the ground, but at the same time it has to be responsive, and that's really difficult right now because you're not going to have really experienced HR people involved in like this cultural transformation that's going on in the workplace. It doesn't happen. Sometimes it's literally just thinking on your feet and trying to just work out the best way of achieving something, even if it's for the short term, but something that can evolve over time.
Perfect. And it will be interesting to have these sessions maybe 5 years from now to understand, did we get it right when it comes to the workspace design? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining today's panel discussion. Just a big round of applause for our panelists.